Sometimes we attempt to talk about God, and when we do, we start out, let's say, with a phrase. Once upon a time, God created the heavens and the earth. Or once upon a time, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So, what would that look like? That is, in your estimation, if we were talking about God in a very abstract sense, what would the word be? Well, the writer of the book of John, um, he seemed to think that, well, if you can make the word also flesh, that would be interesting, right? What are your thoughts on that? Put it in the comment section, and we may do a show on that is these two different beginnings. That is in a book that we call Bereshith, or better put in English, Genesis, and also John 1 1. Okay, we're not dealing with that tonight, but we do have two tremendous individuals. They love to put on the table all kinds of things. They're not very political. They are big Joe Biden fans, and they are for the Democrats, A to Z, I think. And I'm joking. I'm just trying to get something funny going, and perhaps I'm not a comedian, and that's probably true. But we do love all of you guys very, very much, and uh, please understand that we really, really do appreciate all of you who have been sending your care and your prayers and all of that. My father-in-law has been in the hospital. He wasn't expected to live, but he's made it through the difficult times. And my mother has this post-COVID pneumonia, which is not good. But she's getting past all of it, and so next week we should be in good shape, hopefully. With that said, you guys take it away. I'm gonna kick back and watch to see if you guys um, go political or go spiritual or whatever. Where are you guys going?
Where are we going? That's a good question. There's a there was a song put out years ago by a group called Second Chapter of Acts, of all things. That was a unique name, but anyway, they the song was "You don't know which way the wind blows, so how can you plan tomorrow?" And I think tonight we'll just go whichever way the wind blows. We may not know where it's came from or where it's going, but we just go with it. And if I were a fan of Joe Biden, I would hope that I was strong enough to blow him somewhere else. That might not be a good analogy, but that'd be about the closest I would come to being a fan. You know, not that I want to talk about this, but it seems to me that I've heard several people ask the question, and there are always people who aren't fans of Joe Biden or this administration or the Democrats, you might say. And they ask the question, what good thing has been done since Biden has been president? And none of them are able to come up with an answer, nor can I. But my question would be, because I really don't like to come across as someone who just is against. I'm not really against. I'm just for something that is valid and productive and effective and good for all, and that sort of thing. And anyone, to me, and this is just my opinion, I'm just one person. I feel like there's a lot of people that share this opinion. But if you can look at where this country has gone since January, and you can say that with all honesty that it hasn't gone in a good direction, then what would the question be would be, what do you attribute that to? Why hasn't it gone a good direction? why does it seem like so many things are going wrong? And to me, that's kind of a 101 right there. I mean, we start there, and then not only ask the question why, but not just what is the cause of it, but is there something more behind it than just someone doesn't know what they're doing? And that's a scary question, but I keep hearing that question answered whether I want to or not. And I really want to. I really do. I can say for myself that I have more appreciation, and I guess I can call it love. I don't know what else to call it. I think that would be a good term for this country, for what we have here. I have more love for that than I've ever had. And oddly enough, I feel like I was a person who was on the other side of things when I was young, back in the 60s and 70s, when so much of what we're seeing full blown today was actually being introduced back then. And I was clueless. Yeah, I can be honest about it. I didn't know what was going on back then. I can't say I know everything that's going on right now, but I do have a lot clearer understanding of what's going on, where things are going, and to me, it's desperate to get it turned around. Terry, I'll let you jump in here and comment on any of that.
Sure. I try to find some kind of way to pull together what I understand, what I'm learning, what I really am questioning, and the things that ought to be in the news, and the things that are that are only that are only in the news because that's what they put in the news, which isn't really the news. A while back, you and I were talking on a show, and it was several months back, and I'm not holding this against you by any means. It's just, you proved my point. We said something about talking about the news, and you brought up January 6th, and I said, well, January 6th isn't the news. And you said, well, yeah, but it, and again, Daryl, I mean, love you to death, but the thing is that you proved the point that these people won't let go of that event. And it was a crappy event. It was a horrible thing, but it was the thing that they were shoving in front of us so that we would forget everything from January 6th to the day. The way they were abusing the president, the real president on January 6th. I mean, the accusations made, all the stuff that went down, and then the gaslighting and the goalpost moving. You talk to somebody, well, Trump was speaking to, and all I know, because I was watching it in real time. I really don't want to go here, but I just want to give this as an example. All I know, because I was watching it in real time on Right Side Broadcasting Network, Christian-based, company, guys on the street with a camera, but they have an audience of hundreds of thousands of people. And they estimated the crowd to be a certain size. Somebody else on one of these shows, I'm trying to spare people as much as I can here, said, well, no, it was only like 10,000 people. It doesn't matter how many people it was. That's not the point. That isn't the point. The point was, there was a minute, literally a minute, between the time when Trump said, be nice, and they were started to break into the White House 1.8 miles away. 1.8 miles. Now, I've driven some fast cars way over the speed limit. And I'm pretty sure I've made that. I had a Pontiac Firebird and no sense whatsoever. And I'm pretty sure I did 1.8 miles in a minute a couple times. Actually, think about it quite a few times. But sorry, dude, people don't walk that fast. And Right Side Broadcasting is walking down the street and they've got Americans 50 pounds overweight on the average, some of them more than that. They've got their Trump hats on and flags, and they're strolling. I mean, they're strolling. We're talking about a 0.8 mile an hour, and they're going to get there eventually. Some of them are a little quicker and they're up ahead. In the meantime, by the time they get there, all the chaos is happening. And then I watched that unfold, and that was the crux of why I lost a lot of friends, because I said, well, this happened. I watched it. All I'm saying is what I saw. And then, of course, all the video footage that proved that got memory hold. So this is the climate. This is the social climate we live in now. Make videos vanish, make truth vanish, resubstitute it with a narrative and all this stuff. And this is what we're being asked to deal with. And it calls for way more time than most people have. I have a dog that doesn't engage in a lot of dialogue. So I'm pretty much allowed to. I mean, today I did work outside for several hours. I burned some stuff, got soot in my eyes and stuff, and needed to clean. It looked like an ashtray probably. Did that. I came inside. I watched 2 documentaries, spent an hour reading between the time I came in and I sat down here now. That's the kind of time I got. That's how I use my time. Because eventually, something's going to give and I'm not going to be able to do that. I cheated, by the way. The reading was audiobook. So I closed my eyes because they needed the help. And I burned through that. So I'm saying this to say the next thing. I'm not bragging or any dumb thing like that. Just simply, I know that other people don't have that kind of time. And this is what I've done since I was 5 years old. I was reading for real when I was 5. I went to school and they were teaching me the letters and I could already read. I've been reading my whole life. I'm 65. I've been reading for 60 years. I've been reading like a lunatic for 60 years. And I still am not happy with what I know about things. But I do know that I do know a few more things than the average person. So it's really difficult sometimes when I engage in a conversation to try to make it sound, and I don't have a whole bunch of, a lot of the stuff I had to read. I do have, certifications and junk all over the place for that. But most of what I've read, because I've read so much, is it just went in. Some of it stuck, some of it didn't. Some of it comes out and surprises the heck out of me from time to time. Here's the problem. I don't know enough to sort what we're dealing with now. And I probably do know more than most people. I have that frightening thing of, Dr. Jones asked me a question and in the chat box, nothing to do with any of the stuff we deal with here. And I thought, the first thing I thought was, I didn't give him enough information. The second thing I thought was I gave him too much information. Because in my mind, you need too much information. And then you sort through that and you get rid of the stuff that doesn't pertain to you, and you get rid of the stuff that's outdated, or you get rid of the things, or you take a second look at the things you need to ponder. And we're not given that kind of time anymore. We're just given the now. Here's a piece of news. We're not telling you the truth, and now make a decision. One of the documentaries I watched, I thought you'd be interested in, Daryl. It's from Sky News Australia. It came out, I think it was a timestamp was September 27th, I believe. So it's 2 weeks old.
It's
No
old.
point. It's too old to bother with now. I mean, what did they make today? What did they make this afternoon?
Right.
But this thing is about the thing we weren't even allowed to talk about for fear of going off YouTube is finally something we're allowed to talk about, because the great and powerful Fauci has said everything. He's contradicted himself so many times, you lose track. Everyone knows that, except for he's weirdly supported. He's supported like, I'll just say the first thing that came to mind, and you can hate me for it out there in YouTube land if you need to. He's supported like the Catholics supported a priest who messed with children. I mean, for crying out loud, when the guy is done these things, it's okay to say it's wrong. It's okay to say it's wrong. You know, when you know Trump has a style I don't appreciate, really don't appreciate. But that doesn't mean I can't get all philosophical and go, but I'm looking at what he's saying. I'm looking at what he's doing. And I do the same thing with Fauci. And Fauci's arguably better in front of a camera than Trump, you know, because he knows how to smile and nod and do all the salesman stuff. But you know, he may be able to sell more pots and pans than Trump, maybe not, but you know, at least to more average people. But that doesn't mean what he's selling is correct. All that preface, which is probably too much to go to what I'm going to say, the video, and it's worth the time to look at it. Sky News Australia, I don't know the name of it exactly, and I will look because it's worth noting. Special investigation: what really happened in Wuhan is the name of the video. It's not, if you've been following this thing for the last couple of years, it's not that surprising. If you bothered to look into virology and know a few things about that, it's not that surprising. And about 20 more lines that sound just like that. But what this has done is they've pulled out the things that just seem to get either memory hold or contradicted or banned from American YouTubes, and it was banned from conversation on any social media. And this thing has it in there. What's amazing is, and Trump is in there a bit. Trump is interviewed by the person doing producing this video. It's about an hour of your time. It's a good hour. It should be spent by people, and then you can just disagree with it if you don't like the truth and stuff. But Trump's conclusion was very generous, I thought. And he, you know, and pretty much the conclusion they're all coming to is that if it was a wild virus, it would be able to be found in the wild. I'm breaking it down to the simplest forms for an hour. If it was a wild virus, you could find it in the wild. Can't find it in the wild. Yeah. And the other thing was that it doesn't necessarily mean that it was released on purpose. And Trump, his comment, this is a couple of weeks ago, was I don't really think it was released on purpose. And then when pushed further, he said if it was released on purpose, then it's an act of war. And not just on the US, I mean, on the whole bloody world. You know, it probably, but Fauci went so far as to say that they weren't pursuing, he misspoke before Congress and saying that you know they weren't doing gain of function research, and yet they have him recorded in writing. Yeah, that very thing from a year before. So but this is the climate we're cast up against. And you were saying something, and I was going to throw one more thing out that I thought was interesting that maybe isn't quite. I don't see this as political at all. It becomes political when people make it that. This is the life of every person on earth is being messed with by this. And here's where the dominoes fall. And they go out in different directions. It's a very colorful array as the dominoes begin to fall. We've got cargo ships backed up in harbors that aren't being unloaded. We've got supply chains being broken. And the more you're linked into that supply chain, the more critical it is. I'm chuckling because I've no surprise probably anybody here. I was a survival instructor. I've lived close to the land. I've lived very close to self-sustenance for many of my years, though I've taken some time out of necessity and spent more time buying things than growing and shooting them, catching them as fish, shooting them. But for the last 2 weeks, I pretty much lived out of the garden, you know, almost entirely. Other than I punctuated it, and I had some nice burgers a couple days this week, and they were made from the turkey that I shot and froze. You know, so I mean, it's you know, I can live without, not comfortably, but I can live pretty well if the supply chain just turns to crap. For people that disparage the concept, and they use this word prepper as if it's a bad thing. In my opinion, if you go to the store and you buy enough groceries for 3 days, you're a prepper. Because you should be going to the grocery store every day and buying the one meal you're going to eat next, and then go home and eat it, and then go to the store again, right? Because anyone that's doing any more than that is a prepper. So to have enough food for 3 days, or to have enough food for 3 weeks, 3 months, is just thinking a little further down the road. But we're about to see that come screeching to a halt. There's a lot of people that are blowing that whistle who aren't even preppers. They don't know what they're doing. Tim Pool has a pretty solid voice. He's half my age. When I was half my age, I thought I was smarter than I really was. Tim needs some help, but I mean, he's learning. He's taking chickens. He's learning how to, produce some stuff on his own land. He's learning it isn't as automatic as I believe there was a politician that said, well, anybody can be a farmer. No, a lot of knowledge that goes in. There's a ton of failure. I'm in garden groups right now where people just, they go between wanting to try it and then wanting it just to go away. And you go, that's not what it's about. I picked, sorry, I'm going on here and I'll shut up in a second. I went out today and I pulled some, just to give it, I live in Minnesota. It's not, I even said Minnesota like a Minnesotan does there, but it's not optimal. It's the 11th of October. So this isn't prime garden. I picked peppers, I picked beans, I picked cucumbers, I picked two different kinds of tomatoes, and I pulled a couple of squash that had separated from the plants. I laid that up on my ledge, and I've been snapping photos just so I keep a record. I look at it and I go, that's probably 25, 30 bucks worth of food. That's if you can find it, the food. The fact that it's all organic and it's right out the door, is notwithstanding that it's a whole lot more convenient, and it costs me nearly nothing to do that. But the beans have just done that Texan thing that, that hold my beer, and they're just pumping out flowers, and they're just going, oh, we're not going to die yet, thank you. So I'll be eating beans again, for weeks, unless the frost kills them. People don't do that. People are living right off the grocery store, and grocery stores are a freaking miracle. They're like, I've talked about urban water systems. They're an absolute miracle. But the miracle is just about, we're going to find out that the magician actually had to put the thing in the box to pull the thing out of the box, even if you thought the box was empty. And it really was. He's got a false back in there. But when the supply chain grinds to a halt, and it almost inevitably has to, unless we start re-energizing the system that worked. When the supply chain grinds to a halt, this is going to be catastrophic. And the fact that we've stopped, I keep wanting to stop because I feel like I'm saying too much, but I want to finish the thought, not too much information thing. When it grinds to a halt and there's nothing to start it, and everybody realizes that the motion, that the logic motion, the progress, the relay system of motion was never automatic, that somebody had to devise it to begin with and rectify it 100 times to get it to where it was 2 years ago. And now we're blowing holes in the thing. And you can only have so many holes before it fails. I mean, I worked serving time at Walmart. I know what Walmart has in the back room. Tim Pool, mentioning the shortages, was wrong when I heard him say this only today. He was wrong when he says, well, they had more in the back room and the shortages came because they couldn't get it stocked. That's not true. The shortages came because Walmart only orders enough for roughly almost everything for about 2 days at a time. And so, and the supply places that send to the stores, and Walmart's a huge distributor of things that people use. The supply chains that send to the, I lost the term. The big warehouses that send to the individual regional stores have to be functional too. They put one in Minnesota about 35 miles away from me in the town of Mankato, and they immediately hired a bunch of people, and they were just horrible about it. But they were sending it about 150 miles or more from other places. So they basically went in there, fired everybody that they just hired a bunch more people, and then fired those again. They did that several times, and now, to my knowledge, the place isn't even working. And I'll just one quick anecdotal example here, because I'm trying to stock up on things that I use and will use for time to come. A small order I shot off to Walmart. They took and they it'll be there in 2 days, pretty much, and then it went from the one place to the other place, got into FedEx's hands. FedEx damaged the box. It was 2 boxes, separate boxes. They damaged both boxes. So Walmart reinstituted the shipment again, and then they shipped it from north of me in Minnesota to Illinois, and then they shipped it from Illinois to Kentucky. Then they shipped it from Kentucky to Indiana. Then they shipped it to another town in Indiana, and they delivered it in Greenfield or Greenville, Indiana. They delivered it. I'm in Kilkenny, Minnesota, 1,487 miles away, I think. So I had to get a hold of the company again. This is the supply chain breaking. It's not me complaining. I thought it was funny. I've laughed myself to tears, just watching this thing move around the country and the miles it put on. This is the supply chain breaking, and we're coming up against this catastrophe. And this is somewhat inspired by what has Biden done for us? Well, he's not orange, so he's got that going for him. But it's like, this thing worked. It worked all by itself. It's like going up to some kids. You're out there and you're watching kids ride bicycles, and you got a stick in your hand. You go, I wonder what would happen if I just jam that thing in the spokes. And so you jam it in the spokes, and the kid does a endo, and he's the bike's wrecked, and the kid's all bleeding, and you say, well, I didn't do that. This country was running. COVID sucked, but we're working our way out of that. And it seems like they're trying to jam that stick in the spokes. And I'm just touching on a couple things. I mean, this is big. Our withdrawal from Afghanistan. Pick a news item out, which suddenly we've memory hole that already. As if that was inevitable. And you go, it wasn't. It wasn't inevitable till we made it happen. We didn't have to make anything happen, but we did. So all these things will work together to our less than good end here. And I'll share. Sorry, I just got that. I got that Holy Spirit going inside of me right now. Apparently,
you had it shut up, and you had to let it out.
Yep. I was dancing earlier today to get rid of it, but apparently I didn't dance it off. So,
well, I want to go back to something that you started off with, bringing up the January 6th thing. As covered up as I think that is, as little as is going to actually be dealt with concerning what really happened that day. I kind of feel the liberty that we have the liberty to decide for ourselves what that was about. And what I think happened is I would compare what happened on January 6th to a picnic that, people got a little irritated at and had a spat, had an argument and left angry. And people are sitting in solitary confinement because of it. But they managed to let out a few images out of I think I've heard the term thousands of hours of video that they have. And one of them was people walking in the front door, including the guy they called Chewbacca, walking in, visiting with some of the police and different ones, and just kind of making themselves at home, which technically it is our home. It belongs to the taxpayer, the one who, uh, provides the monies for all of that there. And that would be you, me, anyone else that has ever paid any tax. It's always been called the people's house. It's a government that's sitting there that is for the people, by the people, and of the people. I mean, in name. But I'm convinced that there were some people planted in amongst the people, possibly FBI agents. I don't know, maybe just hired people to go in there. After months of what's gone on in the streets of so many major cities, that was actually encouraged and touted, and anyone who was involved in illegal activity then, as far as I know, very little consequence, if any, of all the destruction, all the damage, the murders, everything that took place. It'd be pretty easy to hire a few of those and just say, go in there and start trouble. And we need to make somebody look bad. And it's pretty obvious that that's been the goal of many for a long time. Just say, the one called Orange Man. So in light of so many other things that took place, like I said, to me, what actually involvement people had, and even the lady that lost her life as a result, was for, I don't know, maybe getting too noisy, maybe actually getting pulled into something to where you actually caused a little damage. I know there was damage and there's pictures of rowdiness, but we don't know who those people are, not to this day. We don't know anybody. And they won't, no one will let us know. Apparently it's something they don't consider worth telling us. But I want to move to something more current, because that was ages ago, but they won't let it die. They'll let everything else, like Afghanistan, which was a total debacle. They trying to erase it from our memories, but that ain't gonna happen. But something that happened very recently, we have a wonderful, what do they call him? The Secretary of, is it the, what am I trying to think of? Attorney General, yeah, that has declared parents who show up at meetings as domestic terrorists. And Jen Psaki was, being questioned, and the question was asked, why should these people really be considered terrorists? Should they be considered a threat? And Jen Psaki's response was, well, it is illegal to threaten a public servant. And I thought, are you sure about that? Because, for months last year, public servants were not only being threatened, but they had bricks thrown at them. They were being attacked. They were being abused, still are, at least that's what I thought policemen were considered. But interestingly enough, these same public servants that you can abuse and it's okay are now being asked to go in and deal with parents who are concerned about what their kids are being taught. And they're raising their voices because these public servants that are serving them aren't listening. And they're saying, some are even saying, you have no right as far as what your kids are being taught. Well, the last time I looked, this is still America. And parents do have that right. And I don't think you're gonna shut this thing down. And to me, that's good news. If that's a terrorist, count me in, because I have grandkids, and some of the garbage that is going on in the name of education, if there's anything I can do about it, I will.
To what you just said there, and by the way, the just to cap the January 6th thing off, absolutely. I mean, that it's just what's amazing is classic 1984, just keep telling the lie, just keep lying.
Exactly.
Lie early, lie often, lie as much as you need to. And it doesn't matter. What troubles me is that no one, when these people are lying, these are the people that are going to tell you the truth tomorrow about the next story. Are they incapable of that? Because they're extremely capable of lying to your face, of getting on the camera and just utter BS. We used to do this when we would train agents, how to do something. So we would sit there and try to a couple of people that were more experienced, would be we would just make junk up and see who could make the other guy break first. And the management in the office, we'd sit up there, talk about oh, gee, Mike, it looks like there's a dinosaur breaking into your car. You have that blue Audi, right? Yeah. I think you probably, and we just go back and forth like this, or we would do the question game where you just keep asking questions. You know how that works, Daryl, right?
Yeah.
Just keep it, and you never answer anything, and you just question everything, and you just question because questions drive the conversation. You're allowed to talk, but you're only allowed to answer my question. You're not allowed to offer your own ideas. And I understand that. I'm really trying to edit my conversation here to be appropriate, but all I think of is skull effing. This is when
Yeah.
we should expect more when we're talking about a freaking withdrawal from Afghanistan. We should be able to expect more from mainstream media, and we don't get it. And that ought to be criminal. That ought to at best be criminal. And if there's no source that's telling you the truth, if you have to go to Australia of all places and get them to hop a plane and go somewhere else and look at what's going on because we can't tell the truth about ourselves.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
You guys are bringing up some good points. The Pentagon's former software chief, he stated that he quit because China has already won the tech war. Just a minute, let me stop my mom. My mom has dementia, and sometimes I have to stop everything that I'm doing and try to protect her. Okay, let me see if I can deal with this. But this individual was very, very high up. In fact, he was the software chief at the Pentagon, and he quit because he proved that China has already won the tech war. And what that guarantees, it guarantees China global dominance. And he compared it in this sense. He said that our U.S. government systems were mostly on a kindergarten level in comparison to what they have. And so he said this, he told the Financial Times on Sunday that there's good reasons for Americans to be angry because you have to think about cyber threats. And you have to think about, where does this put our children and our great grandchildren, right? And he said, in the next 5 to 15 years, China will dominate the future by controlling everything from media narrative to geopolitics. And so, when you hear someone like Trump, and it's like everybody and their dog likes to make fun of Trump, but one of the things that he kept nuancing over and over again was China. China's responsible. China is up to something. And it's almost as if we have a lot of politicians who claim to be so responsible. They don't even want to hear that. And that really, really, really does bother me. And the second thing that I wanted to say, and it may tie into the first thing, in 1787, a group of delegates met. It was it was a constitutional convention, and they debated, that is, as to what it meant, that is, to be a republic with a democracy. And it wasn't ever settled. In other words, when I talk about America being a republic, I always compare it to, well, I own a bicycle, and, in a republic, um, the majority can't take away my bicycle simply because we have a constitution. And so I don't want a pure democracy. I want what's called a representative democracy. Hence, we have a constitution. But this really isn't well defined. One of the many reasons why I became a Republican had nothing to do with the party itself, but it had to do with the idea of what a republic actually is, that is, in theory. And so I'm wondering if people in the chat box would put down their ideas about whether they would want to live in a republic or live in the context of what the theory is of democracy. Because, the Democratic Party was shaped to lean more toward a pure democracy without the republic, in a sense. And the Republican Party was kind of shaped to say, no, we need to be extremely traditional so we can keep, that is, the people electing representatives to make laws instead of a voting majority would almost have unlimited power actually to make the laws. In other words, when you get a majority, it's at times, and it seems like we've seen this where you live, Terry. It's like mob rule. The majority will rise up and start doing something crazy, and you can't stop it, and you have no legal way to do that. But in a republic, you do. And so the reason that I'm speaking about these two things, that is, point one being about this chief here at the Pentagon quitting because he truly believes that China has already won. And number two, America is really not behaving, that is, in a manner that represents a republic. We see the two party systems, but we don't see the behavior in either party really comporting to what we have when it comes to our civil experiment and our system of laws. Does that make any sense to you guys at all, what I'm asking here? I may be very unclear, but when you guys were talking, I kept asking myself, maybe we're having these problems because people have let go, that is, of their commitment to our civil experiment and its laws. Maybe we're having this problem because someone's interfering with all of this by controlling the media. And what if another country has already won, that is, the war when it comes to the cyber issues, which is huge. I mean, that means that anything that you would look on the internet, it would be, you should place it in question, right? Because we know that in China itself, these people are indoctrinated. There's a big difference between indoctrination and education. And how do we really know that we're not being indoctrinated? That is, when we Google things, because when you study what Google is doing, are they really working with that is true academics, or has it, has all of this stuff already fallen? What are your thoughts, Terry and Daryl?
Daryl seems to have slipped away, so if he knocks on the door, let him back in. I'm gonna answer what you said by first going to what Daryl was talking about, because I think there's somewhat of the answer contained in the other thing that he brought up, which was the school board issues. And you look at any given point, staff in a school is going to be grossly outnumbered by the parents. So if you're talking about democracy, then the parents should be more, yes, they're not educators, all of them, some of them probably are. The parents should have more say in what's being done in the school than the educators in a democracy. Now, if they're authoritarian enough to know better than the parents, then the parents should have the right to withdraw their children at will, because maybe they're, and again, we suffer the issues whenever we look into a sample group of people of what George Carlin said, that imagine the average person and half of them are stupider than that. That's the problem, because you have really average people. I mean, and an IQ of 100 may be suitable for all sorts of things. Planning ahead for your children's future for the next 50 years maybe isn't one of them. But I don't see that the average 20 or 30 something teacher frequently doesn't have any children of their own being necessarily the default position to be calling education, to be asking Johnny and Susie if they really think that they're a boy and a girl, or maybe they think there's something else. And you go, well, here's the science of it, real science. This troubles me, because real science says that if you have a penis, you're a boy, and if you have a vagina, you're a girl. Now, what you feel like, that's a whole nother thing. But that's science. I mean, that science works in the real world. I mean, it works in all sorts of things. It works in flowers, for crying out loud. I mean, it's a, hence the birds and the bees idea. But we're asked to suspend reality and accept a new narrative handed to us by a minority of the people who are going against science. And then, if we speak against that as parents, and this is the next phase, moving quickly along, moving in, if we go against the narrative, now we're subversives. I heard recently someone down in Texas referred to people that didn't agree with the people who thought that humans came from mothers, that they were the American Taliban. And I go, well, that's a pretty, I think it's going to require a bit more traction before we go all that way, but it doesn't. All it requires is repetition. So what you're saying about the idea of laws, as I understand the way laws come about, it's an organic outgrowth of a society that's working towards normalizing intersubjective opinions. And
Well, we have a couple of examples for those watching who have studied a little bit of history. We have the Athenian democracy that was in Greece, dated somewhere around 500 BCE. Then you juxtapose that with the Roman Republic of 509 BCE. And when you do that, one of the things that you're looking at that is in juxtaposition, you're looking at, this pure democracy idea. If we want to use the word ruled, for example, in a pure democracy, we're ruled by the majority. In a republic, in contrast, we're ruled by the laws made by elected representatives of the people. And so, this gets back to, the question of electoral college and all of that, because when laws are made, these laws are not put forth by the majority of the people. And so think about all the laws that were put together. Did the American people get together and put all these laws together? No, they didn't. And so, yes, we are a republic. Do we have uh, somewhat of a democracy that works within that? Well, it's more of a representative, if you will, form of government. But it does have, to a degree, a democracy. And it seems like the Democrats want to nuance pure democracy more than they want to nuance republic, because there's something tragic about this, because the minority that is in a pure democracy uh, can be so disenfranchised. And I don't get why the Democrats are trying to nuance, the blessing of democracy so much as they do, because the majority can take anything that it wants to away from the minority. And that's a bit upside down. And if you're trying to, let's say you're trying to be equitable, or you're trying to bring a sense of equality into your civil experiment, would it not be best, that is, to approach it in principle with republic ideas rather than pure democracy ideas? And so I think this is something that we need to think about, and why things are going south, because I can't imagine why in extant media platforms, why these individuals are not reporting, that is, on things that have a basis in fact. In other words, what we hear people making up most of these stories. In other words, we can get the information for ourselves and exegete it and realize that someone has tampered, that is, with the facts, so much so that this has been twisted into a narrative. And I'm not so sure that people who want to destroy this country have not already, in a sense, invaded, that is, the areas in which shapes the beliefs of people here in this country. I mean, that's an easy way to take over a country. You don't have to use a gun. You don't have to use anything of that nature. You're attacking. That is, it's almost like a Trojan horse coming right into your country and just changing everything. And that's why when I looked at, that is, the data that this young man was sharing, I said, wow, is this really true? And so I don't know that this is true, but I do know that uh, our media platforms are, I mean, there's something really, really wrong. And so I've got a red flag up my flagpole, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Terry?
Yeah, and just really quick to back up there, I didn't quite get to land the plane on what I was saying. But when we have these intersubjective opinions that we throw it all together, and we go say to ourselves, well, self, it looks like 60, I'll use the number I used last week, looks like 67% of the people are in favor of driving on the right side of the road, and in limiting our speeds to under 140 miles an hour, like I did when I was a youth, mostly because my car would only go that fast. But it turns out that most people didn't want me to go 140. They would prefer 70 or less. So that's what they set the laws at, and that's what I was constrained to obey. But the law was that I'm on Highway 169 heading north in Minnesota, and I better keep it under 65. I didn't have to go 65, but that was the limit. That's the use of the word. And those things come about by, and I know you know this, Dr. Jones, but I just want to say it to make it clear. Propositions come up, and most of that stuff is behind us now. But it's first they create statutes, and the statutes codify that intersubjective morality, and the statutes are the basis for creating laws. And all of that stuff can change if there's a reason, and all of it probably should have a sunset clause, so it's at least re-examined, because some laws don't make sense anymore. There's way too many of them, and that's almost like it's by on purpose. But now Daryl's popped back in. I was saying what Daryl was saying, that if we have the laws in place, that you can go to a school board and talk and make your voice heard, because that's your children in there. And I remember my daughter, who is 41 right now. I remember her first day in kindergarten, and I wasn't looking for demons and doorknobs. I really wasn't. But I remember going in there and the teacher looking me in the eye like she was in control of the universe and saying, "Our children." And I get, I don't even know who you are. I didn't say this, but my thought was, I don't know who you are. And all of a sudden, my daughter, which I would love to use her name, but I'm not going to do that here. But my daughter is now our daughter? Really? Really? That, so now her most cognitive portion of her day is going to be spent under your tutelage, and she's our child. And I damn well better toe the line. And I didn't have any trouble at all missing the message back then. And it was highly imbalanced. But this is Minnesota. We're very progressive here. We were ahead of this thing way back. But my three kids' entire time through their school experience all worked along those lines. And my wife gave an enormous amount of volunteer time to the school system. But she was always, Mike, my friend, and I were having this conversation the other day, because the best way to phrase this is with the N word. He said, we have to find a way to say that better. So just call him the house servant. It's the one you let inside of, you let put shoes on and talk good language and wear nice clothes, but they're not one of you. They're just your servant. And my wife became their servant. And she was very good at that. She was so good at that she was taking kids who were failing classes and tutoring them so that they not only succeeded, but in many cases tested out with A's. And that got, you can imagine what that did. That got the teachers angry, because student A was supposed to fail, and now suddenly student A is going to graduate with a B+. Well, didn't want it to work that well. The reality is when you sit down with student A and you talk with student A, you listen and you try to understand what's going to best make student A understand math, and then you interpret that. And she and I would have conversations about this in the evening, because I was at least pretty good at math. So I would find creative ways to, well, we could go about it this way, go about that way. And she would go back and institute those things. So we're having a staff meeting at home as to what to go, as what she's going to go do in her tutor time with student A. And the teachers got angry with her because she was successful. And she'd created and no one was, they asked for volunteers all the time and no one was doing that. So my wife ended up with a list of, she had 158 volunteer workers from the community for the school, and what days they could work and how many hours they could work. 158 people. When my wife said, "Here I am, send me," there was nobody in the system. And when she was asked to give it up because she wasn't part of the union, she had 158 people on the list. Think about that. This isn't a big school. This isn't a big city. This is a town of a couple thousand people. 158 parents were volunteering time, and they were being used for all sorts of things throughout the school. And it was so successful that some of the teachers got angry because that was not a union type thing. And when she had to hand over the keys to the kingdom, she offered them. She cried for weeks, and she created a list of all these people and all the things they were willing to do and all the times they were available. And her list was handed back to her and says, "We don't want that. We'll start over." That is the mindset. And I didn't, this is my own experience with the system that my kids went to school in, is that the educators don't want any help. They want totalitarian control. That way they can just teach all sorts of nonsense. And I know that's only one small aspect, but that's how it was handled even then. And my kids have been out of school now, all of them, graduated over 20 years ago through that system. So the thing is that, to think that it's gotten better would be foolish for me, because I live in Minnesota, for crying out loud. To think it's gotten better would be really foolish. I mean, we burned 5 miles of Lake Street and called it a mostly peaceful protest last year. While people died, were injured, and lives were ruined. So this is the narrative spin. I think the hardest part for me personally has been to come to, and the other thing you just mentioned, Dr. Jones, too, is the recognition that the media has nothing to do with conveying the news to the people. The media is just a spin engine for for either themselves as a alternative political group that may or may not support a party, or at least as a political, at least as a spin engine for the Democrat Party in America. They seem to not, and they seem to just be incapable of telling the truth about something for the Republicans. Now, I'm not saying that Fox is a solution to that, but we're left with the burden of figuring it out for ourselves. And most people haven't the time, energy, and they certainly haven't got they're ill prepared for the task at hand, putting it politely. So
Yeah.
getting to what you're talking about or not.
You're bringing up so many fascinating things that I wanted to respond to. I mean, it was amazing, just thinking about how many things that I wanted to say. And I said, it would take hours to go through all of this, but let me just pick on one. In class, I hold the position that teachers should not, at a certain grade level, should not give homework that is to their children. And the reason that they should not has to do with several different principles. In other words, if you're going to work a child in the classroom, let's say for 6 to 8 hours, you don't want that child to carry that work home with them. That would be almost an analogy comparable to a person working all day at the job and then taking their work home, only to do what does that do to the household when someone brings the work home? It destroys a lot of what needs to develop, that is, in a person's relationship, let's say with their wife or husband or children or whatever. And I'm not a big fan of children bringing home homework, because number one, when they start asking their parents, I don't understand this, and parents get involved in trying to help them. Typically, that doesn't turn out very well, but it does turn into a conversation oftentimes where you will find a parent trying to say, well, I wasn't wrong when I explained to little Johnny that algebra should be done this way. And, it creates a lot of unnecessary problems. And, after you work 8 hours a day, it's time to go home and relax, put your mind on something else. And so at a certain age, I think that children need to be focused, that is, for a certain amount of hours in acquisition, acquiring, and then when they go home, there's a different kind of acquisition going on. And I don't think that should be tied up with academics, that is, in the form of homework. I'm totally against homework when it comes to K through 12. I get some pushback from time to time on that, but I've made some very long arguments, and I think pretty sound arguments against, that is, teachers piling on the homework that is on kids. I don't think that it does them any good at all. And I think that it, in a sense, it can really be a dysfunctional element within the home. And so that's one thing said. Second thing said, when people want to get involved in the education of their kids, let's say that parent A doesn't know anything about one particular discipline, right? Let's say this, your child is taking biology in school, and your parent wants to get involved in how you're trained in biology. How does a parent, get involved in that without knowing something about the subject matter itself? And that is a question, because I really have a problem when parents start saying that they want to control the education of their children. And I also understand the concerns of parents when they have absolutely no say in what they're being educated, the content of their education. And so I think this goes back to my question about the difference between a democracy and a republic. And this republic that I was talking about earlier, what you have something that is representational. And let's say that you have a public school system. You're going to have people who represent, that is, by the way that we do things at the ballot box, etc., and the way that laws are formed within a republic. And we're going to see that may make for a good educational system. However, the way that it's being done now in our republic, I would say that it's upside down. And so I can certainly understand the concerns of parents going to meetings and vocalizing their concerns. And so I'm very messy in my talk tonight, but some of the things that you were stating, it's just raising a lot of questions. And I keep saying, wow, we need to talk about these things and get into the details. Am I making sense, or am I just rambling crazily?
I'd like to just toss in one quick thing here, and I'd sure like to hear from Daryl, because he's back in the room. My screen just shifted. You can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Daryl should
Yeah,
be able
okay.
to hear you.
Okay. Well, the one thing I was going to say is that there's been overplay. Let me roll this back. Last thing first. You said the thing about democracy. I've noticed that a certain party has been just beating the drum and yelling, "We've got to save our democracy. We've got to save our." I mean, who the hell from? You're in charge. You're doing everything. What are you saving it from yourself or what? I don't know. But anyway, but they're doing that. Just drive that narrative home. Democracy, 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 and they're saying it a whole bunch of times, and they're doing that for a reason. They're doing that in an orchestrated manner, and they're doing that for a reason. And if you don't think they are, then you don't understand sales. That's what they're doing. That's what they're selling. They're selling the idea of a democracy, which comes with all the rat's nest of things that don't quite work with that. And the other thing I was going to say about this, I think people have seen this clip, and I only saw the thing carried out to somewhat the fullest of all the places. Steven Crowder this morning showed this clip of this guy, he's got a lime green t-shirt, which is about 2 sizes too small. He's got dreadlocks and a beard and everything. So he's looking kind of rough, and he's leaning across this podium, and he's just barking into the microphone. Somebody said it's like sticking a wig on Alex Jones. And it's kind of how he comes across. And I'm sure most people have seen it because they've highlighted this in all these things that they've shown about You know, why why, you know, this is like a terrorist group. And Crowder showed what the man was saying. He was angry, plainly. You know, you got that much when you saw the little couple seconds of him barking into the microphone. But Crowder let him talk. And if you can look that up and find that clip, worst case is you'll look in the Crowder show about halfway through the thing today. You can actually hear what the man said. He was concerned, you know, for the future of all the parents in his community. And he was expressing that, albeit maybe not in the best manner in so many levels, but he was, same reason I shaved and washed the ashes off before the show. You know, I mean, he could have probably done that better, but he didn't. So that's what he did. But he was passionately expressing a deep and abiding concern he had for the children in the community and the direction that education was headed. You ought to be able to do that when you're giving your kids to them. And one last thing you brought about homework. I hated that, but you know, I tried to make sure my kids had it down regimented. They would come home, bang it out, and get it over with. It rarely went more than a short time. I never did homework. I did my homework in one class, from one class to the next class. Teachers hated me for it. I wrote straight A's. I pissed everybody off, but I was a quiet kid with glasses, but I pissed everybody off because they wanted me to go home and sit down and carry school into my house, and I didn't have to, so I never did.
Right.
I mean, only when I had to write a paper or something like that, which is pretty rare, did I actually go home and do homework.
But if I can make a point about academics, the reason that people need to go to university is to learn how to go from A to B quicker than if they were to do it on their own, right? And so if an educator can't take you in the classroom from A to B quicker than what you can do by yourself at home doing self-study, that's my point. My point is you need great educators in the classroom who can take you from point A to point B quickly. And the only time that you need, let's say, work that you take home with you would be in a university sense, not K through 12, because you're talking about two different kinds of acquisition. That is after, let's say, students get into their masters and doctorates, or, you know, older students. There is something about first and second language acquisition that really needs to be understood. But I wanted to go back to another point that you were making concerning, you know, this idea of democracy versus republic, because one of the things that we need to keep in mind are the checks and balances, that is, of our Constitution. And what our Constitution does, it protects the minority from the majority. Let me nuance that again. What our Constitution does, it protects the minority from the majority. In other words, you don't want the minority to be completely unprotected from the will of the majority. Let me state that again, because that's a powerful point to be thought out. You don't want, in our civil experiment, the minority to be completely unprotected from the will of the majority. In a pure democracy, in a sense, that's what you're going to get. This is why, you know, when a lot of people get into some of these ballot initiatives, in other words, we do have some states, what they will do is they empower, namely, every citizen within that state to make state laws, and it's through a form, let's say, of direct or pure democracy. And this is known as the ballot initiative. And we hear the Democrats talking about this a lot, because this is when the majority, they rule, and the minority has little to no power in that context. And so the minority is completely left out. And this is why it's very, very important that people understand, you know, why do we have an electoral college? An electoral college gives more equity and more of a balance than if you were to have let's say, let's put in our next president by the majority vote. And so we need to discuss issues like this, because I don't think that people really have taken the time, that is, to look at Athenian democracy versus, this republic that is in Athens. Excuse me, the Roman Republic. And so when you place in juxtaposition the Athenian democracy and juxtapose that with the Roman Republic, I think that what you can do is you can find something in that we, in a sense, can use and improve. And that's what I'm suggesting, because in a pure democracy, we are ruled by the majority. In a republic, laws are made by elected representatives, that is, of the people. And so it's a much different cup of tea, if you will. And so, am I making any sense here, or am I just making noise? And I keep asking the question because I don't know if I'm going off the top. Am I straying away too far away from your talking points tonight? I don't know if I am or not. I'm very distracted because I'm trying to deal with my mother at the same time, and so forgive me if I'm off base.
I think what you're saying is very much connected with what we're talking about here, and it kind of re-emphasizes something to me. The reason there's such a push for democracy, and people, it's one of those terms, and terms are so important these days, the way they repurposing them and using them to manipulate people. I think you're absolutely right that people need to be educated, myself included. I feel like I know more than I have, certainly in the past, but I don't have, I mean, there is some complexity to our government. It's not like you can just automatically understand it.
Right.
And if we were given some education, K through 12, the bad thing about teaching kids is, unless you're like Terry or yourself, Dr. Jones, you're just enduring, and how much you're learning is another question. And you find yourself later in life thinking, gosh, I wish I'd have listened a little more. And yeah, I could even tell at this time whether what they were teaching me was bogus, maybe, but one thing, when they keep emphasizing this term democracy, I think they want to shift away from the idea of a republic. I think if certain people could, they would even eradicate the state lines. I mean, they would the federal government would take full control, and there would be no states' rights if certain people had their way. It's what it seems like to me. But one thing seems pretty evident: when you've got open borders and you've got people just flooding in the country, and everybody knows it, and everybody knows why. It's real simple. It's it's one of the simplest problems we have in our country. The first day, I think it was the first day, it was right after Biden came into power. He signed an executive order that ended what the Trump administration had put into place. There was control at our borders. They had, and just a few more months of wall building, and we would have a setup to where we could actually do what needs to be done at our border. But there was an intentional halt to all of that so that people could flood across. And from what I understand, there's thousands preparing to come into this country, and nothing has changed. Apparently, they'll come on in. And at some point, these people most likely will be given the right to vote. And if you can get enough people voting a certain way so that they can be the majority from now on, then a democracy would be in favor of that group from now on. And honestly, I can't think of another reason why this would be allowed. Why would be intentionally going on? It's
Well,
not a thing of
let me see if I can butt in again, and I apologize for doing so, but you guys are talking about something that's fascinating to me. We do have a constitution, and it does protect the minority from the majority.
Mhm.
That is, if it goes through the process that
if it's
is
adhered to. Yeah.
of how it should be interpreted. However, and let me state this again, we do have a constitution that does, to a degree, protect the minority from the majority, but we do not have a constitution that protects we the people, that is, from its representatives slash politicians. And so our politicians, these representatives, because this is where it's failing. It's failing because the representatives, they should be held accountable. They should have to
Yeah.
abide by a system of ethics. They should not have the kind of immunity that they do possess. And so they can get away with anything and everything. And so really our civil experiment, our social, agreements and everything that's happening in law is in a sense being manipulated simply because we the people, we don't have, that is, protection that is from these representatives. Because basically, in other words, when Trump was being impeached, when you just listen to that, you don't have to go that far back in history, listen to all of the lies. Now, if any of us were in court, or if any of us attended any of these events and we lied, we'd be in jail. They can lie, they don't get in trouble. They can fabricate it, they can say it any way that they want to say it, and they're in control and they're making laws, they're doing all of this. That's the dangerous thing. And so we are not protected from those people who represent us. But the Constitution does protect the minority from the majority, that is, in the interpretive process through the U.S. Supreme Court and its lower federal courts. That makes sense. And so we do need to have something established in our civil experiment that would protect us from our representatives, if that makes sense. That's the weakness of what we have going on here. And we do, by the way, there have been many, many debates. I don't know if you guys have spent much time reading American history. This is dangerous in academics because history, in a sense, is being rewritten. And
Yeah.
what you want to do is you want to go back and read the good, the bad, and the ugly of what was going on and see if we can better ourselves. But when you go back and read, you're going to see these debates that were going back and forth. These are very interesting debates. And we can see when representatives were taking, see how I can put this without being too offensive. They were taking a little bit, they were taking too much liberty, that is, with their power that was given to them by we the people.
I think that's
And
being real nice.
Just two quick things while you're.
Sure.
I wanted to say something when you were saying about what they're doing. Breed animal farm. Animals kick the farmer out. They're going to take over. The pigs rise to the top because they're the smart ones. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Nobody lives in the house. But by the end of the short story, the pigs are living in the house, wearing clothes and walking on their hind legs. That's what we have right now. COVID is just such a brilliant way of showing you this. If you just drop the blinders, screw the party affiliation, and look at what they're doing. They're creating laws. I don't care if masks work or they don't work. They say they work. They say you should wear them. They say you should be 6 feet apart, and they're breaking their own laws. They should be thrown out of office for breaking the laws that they created to lock you down. And then you should put somebody in office that either changes the laws or follows them. But we've got pigs walking on their hind legs saying 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and nobody can see that the pigs are walking on their hind legs. Sorry, bit impassioned there. It's just
It's a good point.
It's just, I
That
mean,
wasn't quite as
Excellent
kind.
point, Terry.
and it really comes down to an FFS thing here. I mean, really, people. I mean, is this what you want? Do you want these demon kings ruling over you that much, or would you like an honest person? The other thing is Pelosi, for crying out loud, who does she represent? You know, and it's like how
A handful.
it's inevitable that she's going to be the Speaker of the House 5 years after she's dead at this rate, because it doesn't matter anymore if she's pertinent, relevant, or timely. It just matters that she can bring her doddering frame in there and say crazy stuff and cackle with glee like the Wicked Witch of the West, you know, when you know, we're going to get you and little dog Trump too. And it's just like, Jesus, I mean, could you just be a little less obvious if you're going to overthrow us? Could you just walk on 4 legs when you walk out into the farmyard so that everybody thinks you're pretending to obey the laws you created to lock the country down?
Well,
What-
you know,
What I know. Anyway,
add one more thing to this, and maybe, I mean, this
good
is
argument.
something, this is a question that I honestly don't know the answer to. But when I see these guys, and I've heard it mentioned, maybe Dr. Jones, you've mentioned it, I don't know. I've heard it stated several times. And you talk about something that needs to be investigated. That these guys making $100 and something thousand a year, guys and gals, are living in mansions. They have millions of dollars. I know some of them get book deals and write trash, you know, for people to read, and people buy them, I guess. But this question of lobbyists, where does that fit into the law, that people could come in and basically buy these politicians? Apparently, that's what it seems like to me.
Well, my goodness, you guys are opening up too many cans of worms. Very
Well,
good
it's a problem
conversation.
with our what's happening.
is.
to us, you know.
It is. It
oh,
is.
there's a lot more.
Sure.
Okay. See, you know, a few minutes ago, I was talking about a problem that we do have, right? You know, we can say we can protect the minority from the majority. Well, that's true. But how can we protect the people from our representatives? You know,
Good question.
who's
Good.
protecting you from Nancy Pelosi and all of the politicians in Washington? I mean, we don't have any protection there. And so these people do what they want to do, in a sense. We do have a framework that they have to work with, but they have immunity in so many different areas. It becomes crazy. And it's kind of like in a court of law. I've always been in favor of making sure that both sides of the argument, in other words, if you have a prosecutor, and you do, if you have a defense attorney, and you do, and they're going to go at it, they should have to tell the truth. But they are allowed, that is, to bring in all kinds of things that would prompt, let's say, a jury. And those of you who know a little bit about Speech Act theory, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is what took place in the Casey Anthony trial, and also during the O.J. Simpson trial. And this is why, you know, jurors, you know, typically make some very bad decisions. It's because the lawyers, they can get away with anything that they want to in terms of tricks. And these are techniques that are allowed. And my point is, no one in government should ever be able to lie. In other words, if you lie to a law officer, it's against the law. You can go to jail. Well, I believe that if a law officer lies to you, he should go to jail as well, he and or she. My point being, I think that we need to get rid of, the notion that some people can lie and other people can't. We need to learn how to do things better. And it may make it very difficult at times until you come up with some better ideas of how to, catch criminals. You may have to learn how to tell the truth all the way through that process. But it's going to better our civil experiment if we all learn to tell the truth or suffer the consequences of lying. That would be a great thing. That would
Be a good
change
start.
everything.
Yeah.
I
Good
beg your
start.
pardon?
It'd be a good start for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, none of the senators, none of the people in the House, if they lie, there's they, they don't have to answer to anyone for their lies.
Nope, apparently not.
No. And if they're voted out, we're going to support them for the rest of their life. It's, they're retired in a sense. And so, we, the people, we're not protected from our representatives, and our representatives are not actually representing us. In other words, let me give you a point. Let's say that in Texas, a large group of people into the millions vote in a particular person as a United States senator. When that person goes to Washington, it doesn't mean that that person has to represent the people who put him in office. That person's supposedly supposed to represent, the collective will, namely of the people, but that's not what's being done. This is why Joe Manchin is in a pickle right now, because the Democrats want him to transgress. They don't want him, that is, to act, that is, in according to those people who elected him, the principles that they hold and are holding Manchin to. They don't want him to vote according to what the people who elected him are saying. They don't want him to hold to that. They want him to walk against, in principle, everything that, the ones who voted him in are saying. And so this is why Joe Manchin is getting a lot of hell, because most of the people who put him in office are, for the most part, they're conservatives, but they're Democrats. And you have some great Democrats out there and who are very, very conservative in principle. But my point is, you have people like him and others, they're not, they become independent of the people. Does that make sense? In other words, when our politicians become independent of the people, and most of the time they do, they just do whatever they want to, and they're not held to any system of accountability, because we don't have that within our Constitution. In other words, if, let's say, if you have something that comes up that is in, let's say, an election cycle, and the people really want X to happen, that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It doesn't even mean that the elected official has to do it. In most cases, most presidents, most people in power in those offices, they don't keep their promises. And one of the strange things was, probably the one disparaged most, more times than not, than any other president that I know of, he kept more of his promises than the rest of them. And I
That was
would
the
bet that
problem.
you guys can guess who I'm talking about. So that was the strange thing, because he's more of a person who wants to represent the people's ideas rather than his own. And that should be the way that the republic works, but unfortunately it's not. And he got voted in because he started speaking like the people. He's very much a guy who knows what it means to get among construction workers, so he doesn't mind saying, what did he say? He said wokeism. I can't remember what he said. My goodness, I can't tell a joke and I can't remember something funny.
That turns everything to shit.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. But who could get away with that? Could Jimmy Carter? Could no one gets away
I
with
don't
that.
think Jimmy Carter could have.
Yeah. but it's been funny. But I don't know. I just thought I'd share my 2 cents. I found what you guys were saying to be very, very fascinating. But it's kind of like this. If you have a group of people, it's very difficult. That is to uh, work agreeably because we have so many different ideas, and everything doesn't rest upon a single axis of thought. And so, how do we work this out? I don't think that we can take the pathway of dysfunctionality. And I think that's what's happening now. We have, Republicans, they harden themselves to where they can't empathize with um, Democrats, and Democrats are doing the same thing. And so you have people at war instead of people trying to work with each other. And so that's what you have.
Well, the greatest division, I think, within the country has been created by government, as far as I'm concerned. But Donald Trump said one thing that I believe he meant. I believe he really, if he ever said anything truthful, and he's probably as guilty of telling lies as the next guy. But I think he did speak more truth than the average. But in this case, he said, they're not after me, they're after you, and I'm just in their way. And, I believe that. And I think that has proven itself. I think he saw what was coming. And the fact that he beat Hillary gave us 4 years to become more aware of what was coming our way.
Sure.
And had it not been for that, there's no telling where we would be right now. But I look at things and I hear it and I see it, and I see more and more people that are just not buying into this. It gets crazier every day. And the reason I brought up that example earlier about the teachers and the parents, the conflict there, and circle back Jen Psaki saying what she did. It's like, okay, it can't get more obvious than that. It's illegal to threaten a public servant. I mean, those were her words. And we got a case where parents are actually just trying to get these people to listen and say, we do have a voice. These are our children. And they're getting passionate about it. And I love it. I think it's wonderful. And they're not challenging the biology teachers or the math teachers or anything like that.
But just a few years ago, they were. I mean, I can remember, and it's still going on. I mean,
were they still were they terrorists though? Were they the greatest threat to this?
Well, I respect and get what you're saying, because it's like politicians, those people in power, are just wanting to disparage, wanting to disparage those who are concerned. And should parents vocalize their concerns? They certainly should. They have a right to say, hey, listen, these are my children. I'm wanting them to be educated and not indoctrinated. What can you tell me about critical race theory that's education as opposed to indoctrination?
Right.
Why? I mean, speak to me about this topic, because we parents very much have a right, that is to hear, that is from people in education, because sometimes people in education, they tend to market. And this is why I've been trying to ring that bell real, real loud in Christianity. Christianity, when it comes to academics, the academics that you know about, those people are marketing. Those people are not acting in concord, that is, with the research that's been done concerning the biblical corpus. But I'm not popular today. I'm not going to get popular. I'm not going to get rich off of talking about what I'm talking about, simply because
you're not rich.
I'm simply saying this. Okay, but hear me out.
I was just being
there are scores of academics writing for Christianity, and they are getting extremely wealthy. I'm talking about
Oh yeah.
extremely wealthy. And Christianity, I mean, you don't go to the Catholic Church and see poverty. You go to the Catholic Church and you see a great deal of wealth. You don't go to these universities that Christianity has built and see poverty. You see a great deal of wealth. And there is a reason for that. It's because the ideology of Christianity is being marketed. It's not an educational paradigm. And how do they get away with it? You know, they will mix in a little bit of education with a lot of indoctrination.
Hmm.
That's the scary thing about, you know, the conflation. And if you can do it with Christianity, why can't you do it with a republic? Do you see where I'm coming from? And so, you know, it's you know, what gets watered down? Well, in principle, we've got a constitution, but if you get the right judges in the right places, the Constitution is going to be rendered how? Ask one question. If you want to really get at what's going on in the Supreme Court, what particular hermeneutic is being used as the basis of how to get at what is true concerning the Constitution? You don't have any one hermeneutic, that is, method of interpretation, that's being used. These individuals can use 10 to 15 to 20 different hermeneutics, and they can equivocate. And most people are, you know, they're not educated. They don't even understand the equivocal things that are being done, that is, in the name of the Supreme Court. And it's sad. Lawyers get by with it all the time. We see it in writing all the time, but no one is saying anything about it, simply because a person like me doesn't have the monies to be able to contest any of these things. Therefore, I'm too broke to do anything. Right?
Can I advance one idea here?
Sure.
I have to use the F word.
Go ahead.
Fear. They use fear, and
True.
this is something, and you and I have a couple aside conversations about this, and I hate to use the word, so I'm going to call myself an expert, but I want to deconstruct that first. An X means a has been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure.
Yeah.
But I am at least an expert in firearms. Part because I have a mechanical mind. I have a systemic mechanical, not systemic like to use in, see, there's trigger word, you know, not like it's used in the press this day, but systemic like it was supposed to be used. Before that from us too. But I have a systemically progressive, you know, cause effect mind. I work out logic really well. I refine logic systems well. So when I look at firearms, a firearm is a logic system of progression of events. Most of them that have endured time are marvels of engineering and functionality and all that. So I'm a pretty good source to go to. And if I don't know,
yes, you are.
I can find one in a moment for you. And I was in groups where people were talking about the gun culture and the gun culture. You got to get your eyes, get them open, you know, and look like you're afraid of the Oswald devils breaking in that window, you know, and you got to look like you're about to lose your mind for fear. And you talk about guns, and I said in philosophy groups where people are supposed to know shit, you know, they know shit about guns. If you have a question, I could either answer it or find an answer in moments for you. Even historically, like the air guns, there, people don't know about that. Lewis and Clark carried a PCP, a rifle with them on their trip to the West Coast. I almost said East Coast. I got so excited there. But they carried an air gun. Most people don't know that. You know, there's all sorts of things. That I watched a movie the other day with somebody had a percussion rifle, and everyone's doing all the time dress, and they got a percussion rifle and they fired it with no percussion cap on, which, if you know anything about guns, means it wouldn't fire. It doesn't work. I've seen them use air rifles because some of them look cooler, to pretend they're high power hunting rifles, to take down big game. I catch the detail and I can answer the question. And if I can tell you something, you're afraid of, let's say, sharks, you live by the ocean. I don't, sharks make me kind of nervous. I went to the Keys and I saw these big nurse sharks, brown ones, under the docks and that. And when I realized the nurse sharks were just big puffballs that swam around sucking up leftover junk, put this, when an 8-foot nurse shark slides out from under the dock you're sitting on, it does give you a bit of a start. But then I realized that's just part of the thing. They're just hanging around, eating scraps and junk. No big deal. I'm not afraid of sharks. But, an 8-foot long fish does get your attention. I can do the same thing for you with guns. I can show you that this gun is empty. It requires a whole chain reaction of things to fire. And if I can take the fear away from you, now you can start to think, now you can start to actually think about that thing. They don't want you to think. So they deliberately misuse terms constantly. And they've got the internet. They've got the internet. If you don't know how to know something, you can go on Google it and they'll probably stumble into it there. You can go on YouTube's and watch endless review videos of all this stuff. You can do this over and over and over again and become informed before you make a goddamn law that says I can go into your house and take your tool from you.
Yeah.
And they don't want to understand it, or they understand it and they don't want for you to
They
understand.
don't want you to have guns.
But they want to make the law to take your stuff away. And there's only one reason to do that historically on the planet, to take, I don't see them as weapons, but they're darn handy weapons. They beat the heck out of a paper towel tube or something like that, or harsh language, harsh language is the first line of defense. But if harsh language fails, it's nice to have something that'll take down a freaking grizzly bear if it has to, and it doesn't even have to be fired. And this is something that's known. It's known. And there's lists and compilations of how many times the presence of the gun in the hand of a homeowner has stopped a crime in progress, probably saved lives. And they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about that at all. There was a shooting last week, a school shooting, but the wrong color person shot somebody. So they didn't shot a bunch of people, but they didn't talk about that because it was the wrong color. You need to have a white guy, preferably from a Republican household, and then it's an issue. But this wasn't an issue. You didn't hear about it. You, meaning general, the public, they memory hold that right away too. Being screwed with. We have the ability to learn things. I'm sorry, I'm going longer than I wanted to, but we have the ability to learn things. We're being messed with. And the first thing you have to realize is that you're being messed with. And then after that, everything, all the other decisions we make out from there. And we can go to people who know things, or we can go to the internet, and yeah, it's a longer path to go to the internet to find things out, but sometimes that's the only place you can go. You can read books, you can get books, you can, I've got about 1,500 in there right now, believe it or not. We can do that. Or we can live in our ignorance, be shocked by fear into a corner and into submission, and ask what we should be afraid of tomorrow. Should I be afraid of somebody with only one mask, with two masks, with one mask? It's so much of a clown show that these people don't believe it themselves, that they regularly can't cover both their nose and their mouth at the same time anyway, or they pull it down when the camera's not on. And they want you afraid and they want you submissive. I'm sorry.
But what you're saying, Terry.
Sorry,
is
I'll shut it off there. But it's just,
what you're saying there is, you have the typical gun owner is a good person. I mean, I know a lot of people who own guns, and I don't know anyone who owns a gun and I'm talking about actually owns a gun, didn't steal it. I don't know of anyone who owns a gun who is a bad person who would ever misuse a gun. I just don't know them. But it's true that we do have politicians who can create. They have the power to create, that is fear among the people, and they can get the majority to do something. And if they can do that, they can go through a process that would be a form of what we call direct democracy. And they could go through a ballot initiative. And yes, I keep saying that if I have a bicycle in a republic, you can't take, the majority can't take that bicycle away from you. But if you have, let's say, representatives within that republic, if you take the one at the top and he comes up with a way to put fear in the hearts of people, hearts and minds of people, they might be able to bypass that republic temporarily and do something like that. And that's unfortunate. This is why we need to really, look at the Athenian model of democracy in Greece and juxtapose that with the Roman Republic. Those two in juxtaposition are a good place to start. Then you try to work that out. How do you deal with education? How do you deal with all the things in life? How much government do you want? How many of us really want the government controlling our education? In fact, private education may be the savior in this sense. The unfortunate thing is most of private education is being driven by the modality of Christianity, and that scares the hell out of me. And so I'm afraid that is of the politicians, and I'm also afraid of the gospelizers, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, it's like we have these people who just want to control our lives, and that's sad. Hey, we're going to have to get out of here. Do you guys have a closing point that's as short as 30 seconds?
Well, I just think we've covered some pretty good territory tonight. It would be nice to see some answers coming our way to how to resolve some of these issues. And hopefully we start with conversation, and that's what we do here.
Terry.
Yep, I think I barked at the camera enough for one night, but we're gonna have to take bread. It might come in handy.
I tell you what, I've been chewing on my tongue tonight. My wife said, your sugar level's way off earlier today, and it probably is. And so I'm chewing on my tongue, and I've probably mispronounced more words than I can think about right now. And so be very, very forgiving. Understand that life is not as perfect as we would want it to be. And I'm not ashamed of my mistakes. That's one of the things that my wife has blessed me with, is with the ability to understand that when I do misspeak, it's just who I am. I misspeak, I mishear, but I learned a long time ago. This is one thing that I would like to share with you. We do have people who like to correct people when they try to pronounce this word and that word, and we have people who like to correct people by saying, well, you used the wrong word, and they do a lot of that. And one of the things that you discover when you're a linguist is that the majority of the time when people do that, it's simply because they don't know what they're talking about. And hopefully you get what I'm saying. And so when someone corrects you and you're trying to say something, you're trying to put something together that is in a form maybe of a sound, or maybe in the form of a sentence, understand that form doesn't equal function, and you have the liberty to use form and function. You have the liberty to use sound in a way that technically sound is not there. We're dealing with compression and decompression. It's an interpretive process, and I could go on, but I'm going to bore someone. But maybe we need to have that conversation, because a lot of people are just, they don't feel like writing anything. They don't feel like saying anything because they feel like they're not educated enough or whatever. And I'm simply saying, get out there and say something. Don't be afraid to write your thoughts, and they come out messy and you have someone who wants to correct you and be your teacher or whatever. Just walk away and understand that they probably don't know what they're talking about.